Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this morning's call. My name is Lance Beck. I'm the President and CEO of the Greater Spokane Valley Chamber of Commerce. It's my pleasure to welcome you on the call with us today. On behalf of our partners at the Greater Spokane Incorporated, as well as West Plains Chamber, we're pleased to bring another joint chamber business resource call to you. Again, we've moved the schedule on these to an every other Thursday. We do have the other call, the Business Leaders Call, that is every other Wednesday. So we're trying to keep you guys up to date with the most important changing news and then some helpful tips in between. And so we'll continue this schedule. And so look for our next call for the joint chamber call will be on July 2nd. We are going to maintain this 11 a.m. time slot. So just wanted to get that order of business out of the way and have that all out there for you. We'll see registration links coming out sometime next week for that July 2nd call. So on our call today, joining us, we have the Washington Retail Association with an update. Both Rose Gundersen and Mark Johnson are joining us. And so we're going to lead off with them. And then later in the call, we have an update from Congresswoman Cathy McMorris Rodger's office. From her staffer, Tyler LeMasters. And then we will finish the call today with some updates from our team at the SBA. Listen to both Mark Costello and Joel Nania with us on that part. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Rose and Mark to unmute. Thank you for joining us this morning. And we're going to hear your update from the Washington Retail Association.
Great. Thank you, Lance. We really appreciate this opportunity to be here today. Thank you for inviting us. I know it's extremely challenging times, especially for retailers in Spokane and the vicinity there. And Rose and I are delighted to share with you some best tips and best practices for safely reopening. We have spent a lot of time working on safety operational plans, which Rose is going to go through, and then hopefully answer any questions that folks have. If we can't get you an answer right away, we'll certainly check with our resources and get you in there. So first, let me turn it over to Rose Gundersen, our Vice President of Operations, to go through the first two slides. Rose?
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Lance, for inviting Washington Retail Association. Retail is very important to the economy as well as the state revenue. As you have heard, there is a big deficit anticipated, and that's why we are going to be busy trying to help the state and help the local economy to get going again. And as we know, we all love shopping anyways. Well, maybe not so much going to the stores for some people like my husband. But it's a fun experience, and we want to make it fun for everyone, especially during the COVID with all the health concern. I have a staff member, Director of Safety, and he worked with me closely to develop the SOP, Safety Operational Plan. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide. This plan, you can find it, download it, on our Retail Reopening Resources website, and we have provided a link there. You can also go on to washingtonretail.org, and you can immediately find it by clicking on a sidebar. With this checklist, it's suitable for any phase that you're in, whether you're phase 1, 1.5, 2, or 3. Well, because this is relevant during COVID time. On this list, we want you to use it every day, not just when you go back and when you get started. Before you get started, go down the list. I don't want to talk about every one of them right now. It has to do with hygiene, PPE, how you do the cleaning and to get started. But we want to caution you that because PPE and hygiene products are always in short supply, buy early and secure sources always, and do it early. We also have a link to a number of posters that you can easily download from a web page we have. It has really user-friendly posters that you can put in front of your store for your employees to remind people about good social behavior right now, like wearing masks, social distancing. Pre-cleaning. I assume some of you are already open, but just want to say there's a pre-cleaning necessary. If you've been closed, drink, put some bleach in the water, pipes to clean it, the HVAC, restart, all that needs to be, have a pre-cleaning. There are two items here that we want to talk specifically about that will be very different for you in your customer relations, is handling returns and exchanges, and the fitting room, especially when you have clothing. How do you handle returns and exchanges? Because there's merchandise that are coming in from the customer. Do you set that aside for maybe 24 hours or more and not touch it and think about how to handle that? And how do you train your staff to handle that properly? Same with fitting room. When clothes have been touched or tried on, do you set that aside? How do you put it back onto the rack just to make sure that you respect the hygiene expectation? Go ahead to the next one. Instruction to employees, i.e. training, is very, very important. We want to advise you to do role play scenarios with your employees when it comes to handling returns, handling fitting room, handling the payment transactions. What do you do when it's cash? Do you have them wash their hands, or maybe at least have sanitizer right next to your cashier position so that they can sanitize their hands every time after they handle a card or handle cash if they have to do it. Face covering is a big issue, and over time what the health department is saying is that face covering is the best way to protect you from getting infected. LNI has continued to issue new guidance. What we have provided here is a link to an integrated document that we are providing, so you can see the LNI guidance as well as the governor's guidance on face covering. As you may know, as of June 8th, all employees are required to wear at least cloth face covering. However, if you're not in the low risk category, anything beyond that, you have to wear something like a surgical mask that is non-cloth. And as you know, surgical mask, even though it's not N95, but it's still in short supplies in many cases, and sometimes you have to pay a lot of money for it. And so it's important for businesses to look for those supplies. What I have found, to my surprise, like hair salon is in medium risk category. That means they have to wear surgical mask instead of just a face covering. For grocery store employees where they may have constant interactions, answering questions, customer service, they have to have a surgical mask quality, unless there is a plexiglass that separates them from the customer as an additional protection. So these are just some examples of new guidance that have come out beyond the initial agreement with the governor's office that took place several weeks ago. So new standard keeps coming out. Now, there are people who have a hard time with wearing masks all day for health reasons. There may be some accommodation policies that you need to develop. It doesn't mean that the employee doesn't have to wear the face mask. What it means is that the employee has to accommodate them, find a position where they don't have to have customer interactions, that they do not have to wear a face mask. a face shield cannot replace a face mask. So these are all the different nuances that employers really need to pay attention to and have interactive discussions with your employee to make sure that there's a good protocol developed and understanding. The last thing you need is having an employee file a complaint when you are just trying to navigate reopening. So it's best to do it and do it respectfully and carefully and take the time to do so. We constantly answer those questions at the Retail Association, and we welcome questions coming in. Role play, how do you deal with uncooperative customer who refuse to do the 6 foot social distance, maybe in the waiting line or the outdoor waiting line, and how do you handle that? It's very it's important to talk about. Employee health screening is a very in-depth policy that you need to develop in writing and communicate to your employees before you do reopening. If you haven't done so, put it in writing. It's legally required to do the health screening, and yet the Disability Act also dictates you to accommodate. So there are a lot of nuances you have to carefully navigate. And what type of screening do you do? Do you have your employee take the temperature before they come to work? If you do so, you'd have to make sure you pay for the time that they do that kind of health screening at home if they're hourly employees. If you do it on site, what do you do and how do you handle the thermometer? Do you have something available? Do you have a no-touch thermometer available for them? And it's important that they sign something in writing, but how do you disclose that, or what kind of information are you going to collect from them? How do you keep the confidentiality of the health information so that it follows the EEOC privacy or the Disability Act? All that needs to be in play as you implement this policy. How do you communicate the expectation to employees if they refuse to disclose information? And to what extent do you ask for information besides symptoms? Do you ask them whether they've gone to a protest or not? Do you ask them if they've traveled to countries where there's a high case of infection worse than the US or in your region? So these are the policies that important for you to consider and include and communicate the expectations very clearly. And EEOC says it is okay for you to mandate COVID testing, but not antigen testing. So those are two things that you have to differentiate and understand. So much for the health screening, but it's a major issue that all employees need to develop a very good policy. And they need to be disseminated in the language they understand. Again, these are the general policies for you to pay attention to. You can always come to us, ask for questions, and we'll welcome questions on this chat room, and also go visit our website. We constantly update it, and because we want retailers to reopen as much as possible. Now, Mark, go ahead.
Great, thank you so much, Rose. Can we go to the next slide, please, Lance?
Yeah, Mark, we did have a question come in that I think would be important to answer as we're at this spot, and it's in regards to businesses that have been open as an essential business. Are these guidelines also being implemented on those businesses to the same level? It is uniform across the board, correct?
Yes. Yes. So even if you were considered essential at the start of the pandemic, you have to adhere to all these guidelines as well.
So for example, the 30% occupancy applies to every business. It doesn't matter the essential or non-essential.
Okay, thank you.
and the facial coverings, all of it. Thank you, Lance, and good job, Rose. Behind me in my screen is a happier time of the signing of the tourism funding bill last year. I know tourism is extremely important to your area as well as many other areas of the state, and hopefully we can get tourism back up and going. It's a very important component of the retail industry as well. So tourism funding. I wanted to touch on, Lance, and folks that are on the phone, two particular areas, and then also touch on liability as well. But phase one and phase two, I know Spokane County is in phase two, and hopefully looking at going to phase three in the very near future once you make the application and it's approved by the Washington State Department of Health and the governor's office. But phase one, which I know you've moved it to phase two, was an extremely important first step in getting retail partially open, and that we call the curbside delivery or retail to go. And a number of retail association members and others successfully implemented this strategy and were able to pivot very quickly and take advantage of this opportunity. One of the best examples, a very big retailer, Best Buy Corporation, kind of led the way in going to curbside delivery. You have to, it's very important that a supervisor, a manager, or an employee, it can be just about anybody, has to be the overseer in your shop, your retail establishment. They have to be the point person on COVID-19 and the coronavirus response. They should be given authority to continually monitor and review all new guidance that is coming out of the states and local governments so that they can keep on top of it and properly inform your team members at your retail establishment. So one person needs to be designated. That's a requirement. As Rose already touched on, having a safety operational plan and checking that every day. I would go one step further and make sure that your team members each have a copy of that, either electronically or a hard copy, and document that. It's extremely important that you document everything to protect yourself and your business and your customers as well. So document, document, document. Again, on curbside, it's really important that the requirements and the expectations of both employees and your customers is very clearly communicated to them with signage, things on your website, your dialogue when they call in to place an order, or if they do it online remotely. Make sure that when you're having team member meetings that you're practicing social distancing as well as the proper facial coverings for your particular environment that you're on. Transactions, especially in phase one, we would hope were entirely taking place either online or over the phone, and the payment system as well is being done either online or over the phone. If you do need to have exchange of money or credit cards at the facility, do that very carefully, as Rose already mentioned, either wiping down the transaction machine after every use, wearing gloves if you are handing it to somebody, making sure, again, you have the facial covering on, and etc. But if you can do it at all remotely, that would be vastly preferable. Have designated pickup zones so that when somebody pulls in, it's very clear this is where you park. I've been seeing great signage throughout the state, and people are doing this very well. But just make it as easy and comfortable to the customer and your employees. The vibe, the communication, the initial reaction of consumers as they start to get back into purchasing and shopping is going to be essential for retailers and other businesses to successfully reopen and have a good experience. If a customer comes to a store that's in phase two now, they find that everybody's crowded at the entrance to get in. There's no signage out front. They get into the store. Some of the employees are wearing facial coverings, some are not. The aisles are crowded. It appears to be over the 30%. They're going to have a bad experience, and this is going to really deter other retailers from being able to safely open and for our economy to get back up and running. So those first impressions in these first few weeks of phase 2 are extremely important. Lance, can we go to the next slide, please? So continually training. Before you open your doors for phase 2, and many of you have already done this, before you do, you need to train all of your team members, all of your employees on what is expected of them and the safety protocols that are in place for your establishment. You have to share with them and tell them that they have to know who the point person is, who is the assigned individual, the COVID-19 czar or czarina in your store. They have to know who that is and who to go to for questions there. Personal protective equipment, PPE, has to be provided to them by the employer, unless you say, okay, if you'd like to bring your own facial covering in, you're welcome to do that as well. Unless there's an agreement between you and the employee, you need to provide that. And again, document. Write down or have them sign that they were trained on what is expected of them in proper COVID. If you don't want to use the same PIN, do it electronically. Give them a brand new fresh PIN that's not been touched by anybody else. Wipe down the PIN. Take all the precautions. Err on the side of going too far rather than too little, because everything is going to be watched very carefully. Anything that is touchable, the door handles getting in, if you don't have an electrical opening door, make sure those are wiped down and cleaned on a regular basis. Make it very visible so that the customers and the employees say, oh my, okay, great. They're cleaning the door handles again for the 4th time today. That's fantastic. We like to see that. Make sure that the customer capacity doesn't exceed 30%. The good news is we lobbied hard for this. It does not include employees and management of that store. So it's just your customers is what your 30% is. And that's set by your local fire marshal. So whatever the capacity is, and that should be somewhere posted in your store. If you're at 100, you can only allow at this time a 30% in your store, 30 customers at a time. If you are fortunate enough to have a waiting line, I would highly recommend, if you can afford to, have a team member outside, keeping an eye and making those people feel safe and comfortable. Not an overbearing enforcement style of eye, but welcome, nice to have you here. We'll get you in as soon as possible. Thank you so much for adhering to the 6-foot policy. Have markings on the sidewalk with big stickers if you can. Tape them off. Somebody that's been doing this very well is Trader Joe's. They've been open as an essential business, but they very clearly have a system in place. I went to Trader Joe's in Olympia here last week to pick up a few things. They have somebody at the front door. They hand you a shopping cart. They visibly wipe it down before they hand it off to you. They're wearing a facial covering. They have gloves on. They explain that they have one-way aisles. Please go up and down the right way. So everybody knows what's expected to them. They have a huge sign out front saying, this is what we're doing to protect you and our team members. They have markings on the sidewalk outside before you get in. You just feel at ease and you feel like they're taking the necessary steps to ensure your safety as a customer and that the team members, your employees, are being cared for as well. So go that extra mile. It's really important too, again, back to payment strategies. You need to have, you can't get away without putting up a plexiglass, some kind of barrier between you and the checkout folks and the customer. Very important to have that up in place and taking advantage of that, and that they're wearing a facial coverings, even if they're behind that plexiglass covering at the checkout facility. And again, if they're using electronic payment, wipe it down after every single transaction. Make sure that the person that's next in line watches you wipe it down. It'll make them feel even better. They won't be cautious about pressing the buttons or inserting their credit card. If you are doing money transactions, do it as carefully as possible. Payment and bagging. Most stores and most municipalities have suspended their bring your own bags requirements. Every municipality that I know of, and there's 36 of them, they have all suspended their bring your own bags prevent any spread of the virus on bags that are brought from home. So all stores should be handling their own bags and either paper or plastic. So that's a very new approach to it all as well. So also signage, you should have a sign outside before they get in. And it would be really helpful to have a visible hand sanitation station as right outside before they come into the store. So it shows that extra level of we care about you and we want you to have a good shopping experience in here and be safe for not only you, but also for the team members that are servicing you, keeping a 6-foot distance within the store. And then it's really important, again, visually for that everybody to participate, the management. It sends a very bad signal if the management's saying, okay, all of you wear facial recognition. I'll be over here without my face mask on. That is not a good approach to it and leads to team members not feeling like their team leader is practicing what they're preaching. So have the management follow the rules as much as possible, and the owners, excuse me, if you own a small retail establishment. Some of my members, and I was on a call, just share with you, I was on a call this morning with the president and CEO of Target, and Target has 1,900 stores, 350,000 team members. They were considered essential from the get-go. They saw an over 300% increase in their buy online and pick up at the store business, and they're pivoting to keep that as one of their key things going into the future. They say people like the convenience of calling or ordering online and driving to the store in an hour or two, popping their trunk at the designated location. It gets stuck in their trunk and they drive off. They've made the purchase. They haven't come in contact with anybody. They have gotten what they needed in a very rapid fashion. The other thing that they're doing extremely well, and this will work for some retailers and not others, you order online and they will deliver it from the store to your front doorstep in a matter of hours. And if you're available to do that, that is a really good model. Target, again, is expanding that operation because they found it they're using their stores as mini distribution centers rather than the monstrous distribution centers, the 100,000, several million square foot distribution centers. They're using these stores as mini distribution centers. You order it, a team member that's been assigned to do deliveries grabs your item or items and brings it to your doorstep. They're finding this as a huge area of growth for them, and another area that you can model at. Something that I've been really impressed with, folks, is the amounts of sharing that my members and other retailers are giving. So those that have been essential have been kind of leading the way and developing best practices on how to do this safely and to keep the customer happy and comfortable. And they're more than happy to share with you how they're doing it and what they have found as pitfalls and challenges and how to overcome those. So if you need any information, we're a great resource for it. If you have any specific questions, because there are so many different kinds of retail establishments and so many different nuances that need to be taken into consideration to adequately open safely and have a good experience, that we're happy to tailor that to you. And I'd like to just add to Rose's point, we're here as a resource. You don't have to be a Washington Retail Association member. Our services are free to you, and we'd be delighted to help you develop an operating plan and get you back open and contributing to your communities. This COVID crisis is wreaking havoc on the state finances, as Rose made comment on, as well as local governments. We realize that. And as the retail doctor, Bob Phipps, said on a webinar I was on a week ago, he said, we've got to sell our way out of this pandemic. And the only way we can do that is by making customers and team members feel good about their shopping experience and start to generate those sales and generate that tax income is the only thing that's going to save us. So I commend all of you for being in phase 2, and hopefully you're operating safely. Couple of cautions, and I don't want to end on a glum note, but the Department of Labor and Industries has said a couple of weeks ago that they're going to be enforcing the new regulations and the requirements that came into full swing with phase 2 and on June 8th for all essential businesses as well. What that means is they have 140 inspectors out in the state, and they will be going store to store. And mostly it'll be based on complaint driven. If a customer or an employee says, I don't feel safe and I don't think my retail establishment is operating safely, they'll investigate those. But additionally, they'll be doing a snap inspection of stores as well. If they feel that you are just blatantly out of line and causing an extremely unsafe situation, they can cite you on the spot. The citation that they're allowed to cite at this time is almost $10,000. Now, that is not their first choice, and I've been told very clearly by L&I and the manager for the Safety and Health Division that they would like to work with businesses, give them a warning first, bring them into compliance. But if they find that you are just totally disregarding all and every guidance and regulation out there, you will be issued a citation. And the first citation is $10,000. It'll catch your attention real quick. Also, you want to be very careful that you're setting a good tone with your local health department and the Washington State Department of Health. These organizations are very carefully monitoring how people are interacting. The poor Yakima and the Yakima County are in dire straits with a huge explosion of cases and hospitalizations. They're still stuck in phase 1, and we're not sure when they'll be coming out of it. We're working very closely with Yakima and our team members there to try to get them open and into the next phase. But until they get a handle on the number of cases that are coming out of there, they're going to be stuck in phase 1 for a while. We're helping them with something called Mask Up, which is getting people to wear their facial coverings in Yakima, and we're hopefully that will continue to grow and be responsible. We'll see the number of cases plummet in Yakima. But my commendations to Spokane and the areas. You guys are doing a great job, and I hope you continue to hold with it. I know it's a pain only operating at 30%, but hopefully we can move to phase 3 real soon and get even more people back into our stores safely and continue to operate under this new normal, which I know is very trying at times and challenging at times. But again, I want to thank Lance and the folks with the other chambers for inviting us. We stand to your questions and anything else. So Lance, I'll turn it back to you now. Thank you.
So Mark, I would like to make an announcement of an upcoming webinar. During this COVID, there's this thing about transfer of wealth from small business to large businesses. As you can tell, Mark mentioned a lot of great success with large businesses, but we want to help the small businesses as well. On July 14th, we're going to have a webinar temporarily titled Small Business Thriving Strategies in the Digital World, so that you can do omni-channel, you can just use low-cost digital space that is available to small businesses. And you'll be proud that the speaker is from Spokane. She's a small retailer in Spokane. She's also a business advisor with the Washington Small Business Development Center. So come to our website. We don't have it all ready for registration yet, but it's on July 14th. We look forward to sharing the good information available to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Rose. We will, again, so everyone's aware, we'll share this slide deck with the links in it out in our recap email, as well as when we have the registration for the small business small retail business webinar available. We'll share that out to the group as well who attended today. So again, thank you for your time today. We're going to get a quick update from Tyler LeMasters with Congresswoman Cathy McMorris Rodger's office. So Tyler, I'll turn it over to you, and then we'll jump over to SBA.
Thanks, Lance. We want to thank the Chamber, the Valley Chamber, and Colin for inviting us to talk about this important updates that we have on the flexibility. That's one thing I want to talk about in particular is the Flexibility Act and updates on what it does for the payment protection program. Yeah, so mainly This bill provides businesses with more time to keep their employees on the payroll and to ensure the continued operations as we safely reopen. It extends the loan forgiveness period from 8 weeks to 24 weeks. This was the main thing that small businesses in our area, in our district, were talking to us about. So we're very happy to co-sponsor this bill that gives substantially greater flexibility. Also, the Flexibility Act lowers the percentage of loan proceeds to be used towards payroll from 75% to 60%. So previously, you had to use 75% of the money, the loan, to pay towards your payroll, your employees, to keep them on, and that would make the loan forgivable. Now that number has been lowered to 60%. And then also it provides a safe harbor or protection for employers who are unable to rehire the previous employers or find a similarly qualified new employee. So if you had problems getting new employee or your old employees back, and then you had problems hiring another employee who was qualified to work the position, then there are protections put in place with this Flexibility Act for you. So all this is really good news. We're very happy to co-sponsor this bill. Congresswoman is very happy to co-sponsor it. It is unanimously what small businesses were talking to us about. And so we do feel like it addresses a lot of these issues. It does also confirm that June 30th is the last day that you can apply. So if you haven't applied for the PPP, you should be thinking about doing that if that's something that you need. And maybe you have been unsure about what it means for your business or if it's right for you. I'll leave my email in the chat box and you can shoot me an email. Also, the SBA is going to be on the line, so I'm sure they can give you some good information as well. And then also quickly, I just wanted to touch on the next phase of relief. You know, the Congresswoman feels this is a very important point. A lot of people have been asking us about what's next. The next phase would be phase 4. You know, the last data we've seen, and the SBA can correct me on this or give us the exact numbers if they know it later. But the last data we've seen, there was somewhere between 120 and 130 billion dollars left of the 659 billion allocated. And so there is still money. There's still money to be used. So the Senate is taking the lead on phase 4, and Leader McConnell has talked about passing a narrow phase 4 legislation to address the remaining issues with COVID-19 relief. CMR, she is looking forward to the package, which should be targeted to the industries that really need assistance. To know those industries, we'll need to use up closer to the money that's left. In May, the Congresswoman voted against Speaker Pelosi's $3 trillion wish list. This legislation was full of provisions that had nothing to do with COVID-19 relief and was a partisan talking point. But she's excited to see the Senate's legislation, and hopefully that will be sometime this summer. Yeah, if you guys have any other questions, I would love to take them and answer them best as I can.
Okay, thank you, Tyler. Again, questions, you can put your first name, last name in the chat box and submit a question there. We're going to try and get through them. We've come to the point in the hour where the rapid questions will start flowing following. Mark and Joel are always popular presenters on these calls, so I'm going to turn it over to them for a little more detailed look at what has changed and how it affects us moving forward here. So we'll have Tyler hang on the line and anything. Tyler, if you just keep an eye on the chat box there too, you can pop some replies in if anything comes there. But
yeah, Lance, and real quick, I just want to say I am the small business staffer. So again, if you have questions or need help, just reach out. Thanks, Lance.
Awesome. Thanks, Tyler. So Joel, I see you're unmuted, and I believe I see Mark as well. So I'll turn it over to you guys for
Yeah,
the remainder.
Thank you guys for having us on again. We've got, I think Mark's going to do most of the talking today, but we've got some really, I think, positive directions in terms of the changes that have been made and the speed with which those changes were made, especially when it comes to the Paycheck Protection Program forgiveness that Mark will address, as well as the reopening of the EIDL portal to all small businesses. And back to Tyler's question, there is, I believe, $1.3 billion or $130 billion remaining in the Paycheck Protection Program. And the deadline for application is June 30th, although I believe the lenders, and Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, the lenders can cut off the application process earlier than that, but our official deadline is June 30th. So there's money available. The EIDL program, they're still working feverishly to get through all of the applications, and there are a lot of applications. I've been pleased in our area because I know a lot of businesses who have gotten EIDL assistance, but I know there are a lot more that are still waiting, and I'm sure seeming like waiting an interminable amount of time. So they are working 24 hours a day to clear those through, and I can only ask for patience, which I know is running extremely short. But Mark, maybe you can fill us in on the updates and changes and on the PPP.
Sure. Thanks, Joel, and thanks, Lance, for the opportunity. Tyler did a nice job of kind of covering the high points of the PPP Flexibility Act. And one thing I just wanted to reiterate, kind of a combination of what Tyler and Joel both talked about, is that there is still a unique opportunity for businesses that have yet to apply for the Paycheck Protection Program to do that. And it's really an opportune time because of a few different things, one of which is that we still have a lot of lenders out there with capacity to make these loans, and they can do so quickly. They don't have the backlogs that they previously had. Additionally, though, the program itself, as a result of the Flexibility Act, is frankly a little bit more customer business friendly than in its original design, and specifically the time frame during which you're going to be able to use the funds has been extended from 8 weeks out to 24 weeks, what they call the covered period. And additionally, you'll have more of an opportunity to use the PPP funds for non-payroll purposes. Specifically, you can use up to 40% of a PPP loan now for things like utilities and facilities rent and interest on mortgage debt. So take advantage of that if you have yet to apply or receive a PPP loan. The opportunity is out there, and for those that have already gotten PPP funds, and by the way, that, as we've talked about, is a huge number of firms in the state of Washington. Over 90,000 small businesses have received PPP loans for something just north of $12 billion. So it's been a significant undertaking. But if you have received a PPP loan, the news as a result of the Flexibility Act is very good. And not to go into a ton of details, but I just wanted to let you know that the Flexibility Act itself really extends a lot of what I just talked about out to those who have already received PPP funds. So in other words, if you've got money out there right now and you haven't spent it all, rather than an 8-week covered period, you actually now have 24 weeks to spend the money. Rather than the 75% requirement for payroll, you can now take advantage of this increased flexibility to use up to 40% of the funds for non-payroll purposes that I described here a minute ago. And ultimately, I think as a result of the Flexibility Act, what we're going to see, number one, is a considerably streamlined and easier to not only understand, but to actually execute loan forgiveness process. I think that's a really a positive thing. There's a new 3-page, what they call an easy application that I think is going to be a considerable step forward from the original 11-page application that was put out. And there are additional what we would call safe harbors built into the analysis for businesses that are seeking loan forgiveness. And so, for example, if you were not able to rehire employees to the pre-COVID level, as a result of things beyond your control, like state shutdown orders or municipal directives in that regard, that's going to be a safe harbor for you that's going to allow you to get full forgiveness, even if you weren't able to achieve a return to the level of employees in your firm that you had before the COVID situation. So ultimately, I think what we're going to see is an optimization of the forgiveness process as a result of this Flexibility Act. So I think it's good news. I think it's going to be easier, and I think that small businesses should feel more confident about what that process is going to mean for them going forward. I did want to say, number one, to reiterate that June 30th deadline for PPP. And then number two, as Joel alluded to, I wanted to just say a couple things about the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. And I know that this has been another one that hasn't exactly been the smoothest execution of a massive small business support program, but I want to say that as of right now, a couple of things I think look promising. And number one is that loans are, in fact, as Joel said, being approved, and they're being approved on a pretty considerable scale. Over the last week, we went from 1.1 to 1.3 million approvals in the country for an additional $10 billion, from 80 billion to 90 billion in total EIDL funding. And the program itself has now been reopened to all eligible small businesses and nonprofit organizations, whereas it had been restricted in the last several weeks to only agricultural businesses. And I think that's promising because it sort of suggests that there is enough funding there to handle all of those applications in the pipeline, and hopefully additional applications that are being sought at this point. So I want to refer you guys back to that SBA website, sba.gov/coronavirus, for detailed information on the PPP, and also links that will get you access to the EIDL, Economic Injury Disaster Loan application portal, through which you can actually apply directly for one of these SBA disaster loans. Hopefully, the combination of those two things in a lot of cases is going to make a difference. While the PPP funding, just by definition, is somewhat more restrictive, the EIDL funding is more flexible and could have a considerable impact, I think, on businesses that are sort of starting to figure out how we're going to really re-engage in earnest in the economy as a result of reopening and things like that. So keep those programs in mind. Also, as Tyler alluded to, this is a question that's kind of circulating out there quite a bit. There's $130 billion remaining in the PPP fund. if you will, what's going to happen to that. And I think it's obviously going to be a little bit speculative to talk too much about it, but I think it's interesting. There has been discussion in the Senate, I believe, a proposal to introduce a fourth PPP program, PPP4. I don't know if that makes 12 Ps or what, but anyway, it would be something that I think people rightly so are asking for, and that is an opportunity for those that have received a PPP loan already to actually have another shot at it and make application for a second PPP loan, and hopefully this is going to be more of a re-engaging kind of funding as opposed to a substitution for unemployment kind of funding. Stay tuned for that, but as this process has gone on, it's been kind of a journey. It wasn't just a one-shot deal, and I think the journey is going to continue. But stay in touch with SBA if you can. We look forward, hopefully, to the opportunity to continue to interact with you guys on an ongoing basis as we work through this. And I just thank Lance again for the opportunity to be here and to chat. So you guys take care.
Yeah, thank you, Lance. We appreciate the opportunity, and Colin and the other chambers. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks both Mark and Joel. We do have, we're going to go rapid fire question around here just to get us through the end, and we had quite a few come in at the end of the call here. So one question Toby Bromling from the West Plains Chamber of Commerce asked in regards to the idle cash advance. Are you hearing anything about the cash advance portion reopening? I know the loan application portion is reopened, but the advance from what
that's all included in, and it's I guess I would blame us for kind of a bad marketing icon on the website. It looks like a $10,000 forgivable loan / cash advance or something. And when a small business applies for the EIDL, there are two components, and it's a very simplified process. It'll take about literally 12 minutes to apply. And when you get near the end of that application, you're applying for the loan, but at the end of the application, there's a little checkbox, and it says, do you want to be considered for a cash advance? And some people are missing that. And if they check that box, more likely than not, they're going to get a cash advance. I think in my experience, Mark, you'd probably concur, most small businesses are getting a cash advance based on $1,000 per employee up to 10 employees. That portion is forgivable, and then they'll continue to process the loan side of things and eventually get back to the small business with an offer of 0 to whatever, tens of thousands of dollars for a loan, which is 3.75% loan, always amortized over 30 years to really keep it affordable for the small business.
So if a business has applied and missed checking the box, then I think that would be the next big question. Is there a way to go back and be reconsidered for the cash advance forgivable portion?
That's a tough one. You have an answer for that, Mark? That's a really hard one.
No, but one of the problems has been really accessing real-time assistance on this thing, Lance, and it's because of just the sheer volume of activity. But I might suggest that somebody could certainly shoot an email to the customer service mailbox and ask that question.
Yeah, or call it. I published that 800 number, Mark, on the chat box.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
you could
absolutely.
ask for tier 2 and just say, I missed the box. Can I go back in? Especially if your loan hasn't been funded yet and you haven't received, well, you wouldn't have received any cash advance funds. It just never hurts to try and, try a couple of times.
Okay. Let me jump back through a couple here. There was the question in regards to being turned down because of poor credit rating. I think we've got that connection made to get Patrick some more information there. So Patrick will follow up with you to get you direct contact on that one. And then if a borrower who applied prior to June 5th chooses the 24-week coverage period, and they apply before the end of their covered period, can they, excuse me, sorry, let me restate that. If a borrower who applied prior to June 5th and chooses a 24-week covered period, apply before the end of the covered period if they use
Yes.
all
Yeah.
the funds early?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, Lance. And that's been, so we've been on now several of these webinars already, and that's a really common question. So it is, they, you know, if somebody got a PPP loan early, they've spent all the money, they've done everything right, their 8 weeks has expired, they can actually make application for forgiveness right now. But if they haven't,
Mark, I've been recommending that really the sooner the better. Once you've utilized those funds, apply, you know, because we don't, at this point, we don't know how long that process takes. And I would say the sooner the better.
But Lance, if they want to go, you know, if it turns out they still had money left as of the time that the Flexibility Act came out, and they want to extend out utilization of the funds, they can do that. If it turns out, you know, it's going to go out to 14 weeks and then their money's gone, then they can make application for forgiveness. If it's 20 weeks, whatever the case.
Gotcha.
And the other, I think, I don't know if you covered it, Mark, but the other flexibility portion was that any remaining PP funds that you end up with as a loan, it's not a 2-year amortization. It's now a 5-year amortization, and it's still at 1%.
It's a great point.
I see another question here about people applying for an EIDL but didn't think they are eligible for the PPP because they were sole proprietorships. And you can have both an EIDL and a PPP. So by all means, if the business needs to apply, if they've already gotten the EIDL, go to your commercial lender and apply for the PPP if it's needed.
Gotcha. And then do you guys have any recommendations you're hearing from lenders on with the June 30th deadline? Are you seeing anything out there as far as when cutoffs for application through the lenders are looking? Is June 30th going to be the cut, or is it truly a little earlier than that?
Right. No, that's a great question. So I think people need to think about what it's going to take a lender to process a PPP application. So I would just imagine they want to build in a couple of days. So in other words, I wonder what day June 30th is. What do you guys think? Is it
Tuesday?
It's going to be a Tuesday. Okay. So I would imagine they'd want to probably make sure they're making application that previous week to the lender. And you know, I think these are continuing to be available through lender websites, through PPP portals. Make sure they're getting that stuff in. I would imagine probably a week before. Give the lender plenty of time to process and transmit to SBA.
Okay. I think we got through the questions that were posted, or the questions posted got direct answers. We will do our standard recap and have all the Q&A listed on the webpage with that follow-up here, along with the posted link of the call. And so again, thank you for joining us today. And on behalf of both the Greater Spokane Valley Chamber of Commerce, GSI, and the West Plains Chamber, we appreciate your continued engagement. I would leave you with the one circling back to our retail and the fight we've had to get to phase 3. We do need our retail organizations' help to exhibit the behavior that's being requested and the guidance that's out there so that we can continue to advocate that we are ready to get to phase 3. Everyone likely saw the county commissioner's letter requesting that the health district apply, and the subsequent denial of that request from the Spokane Regional Health District. And really the denial points to a lack of being totally confident in our community to be ready for that. And so we as businesses need to continue to do our part. And so if we're exhibiting good behavior, it helps the consumers also do so. When we walk in, all of us have had that emotional roller coaster walking into an establishment where either everyone's practicing the safety measures that we're being told are necessary, or no one is, and the willingness of you to maintain keeping your mask on can often be driven by those surrounding us. So again, do what you can to continue to do your part to create a safe environment in Spokane County here, so we can get to phase 3 and phase 4, and subsequently let's stop talking about phases and be out of this thing. So again, thank you for your time. We've got our email address. Colin posted that there, info@SpokaneValleyChamber.org. If we missed your question, or if you have one that comes up here after the call, feel free to email us. Colin will get you connected with the right resource and going forward there. And then lastly, put your calendar mark for the small business retail webinar that the Washington Retail Association's got slated for July 14th. We'll get that call registration out here as soon as they have it available and share that link with everybody. So again, thank you for your time on the call. Have a wonderful rest of your Thursday, and hopefully a bright sunny weekend to enjoy some outdoors activities. And again, our next joint chamber call will be on Thursday, July 2nd at 11 a.m. So thank you for your time, and we are adjourned.
Thanks, Lance.
Thanks, Lance.
Have a great day.
Bye, guys.